commonly flashing back to being a classroom teacher on open house day or being a principal, looking out the door to see if any more parents are coming before I start. But I want to welcome all of you here. I'm very happy that you made time in your busy day for us to learn more about enrollment. And we do have a sign-in, but this was an optional forum, and the sign-in really is for our information so that we know who wasn't here, and if they have questions, we can forward the materials to them. It's really nice to see so many colleagues here, and my Facebook friends too, because I miss all of you from principal meetings I don't get to go to anymore. My name's Marceline Marquez. I'm the Director of Neighborhood Schools and Enrollment Options here at San Diego Unified, and this is my 31st year with the district. So longtime employee, teacher, VP, resource teacher, peer coach, vice principal, principal, and now here I am in enrollment options, and I love it. And in about, 6 weeks, I'm going to have a few more little extra duties to attend to. And my experience with enrollment, aside from being a classroom teacher and a principal, was really more as a parent. I had my own 2 children enrolled in San Diego Unified as residents, as choice pupils, and also as inter-district attendance pupils. So I had run the whole gamut as a parent, and I always found it a little mysterious. Enrollment was very mysterious to me. And at one point, I did visit the old enrollment options office over in Annex 7, and I remember, even though everybody there was super friendly, it sort of had like a DMV feel to it. It wasn't like really welcoming, it wasn't comfortable. And so I'm really happy now to be over in Annex 12, where we've been able to create a very welcoming environment for parents and also for staff. It's very open and cozy, so if you ever want to stop by and visit us and learn more about what we do over there, please do come by. We're situated right between Bernie and Quality Assurance, so we joke around and say you can go complain and then come over to us and we'll help you find a school. It's not really how it works, but that's what we tell people. So it's a totally different feeling now over there, and I hope that you come see us. We get multiple inquiries every single day, really common, repetitive inquiries, and so I'm really happy that we have today's opportunity to kind of clear up and clarify some things. And the folks who call us are hard-working school staff, busy principals, all trying to follow the rules and do everything correctly and appropriately, and we appreciate that. And we know that you're doing your best to accommodate questions and accommodate families. And so we're here to provide information, clarify any questions that you have, as well as listen to your concerns. And even if you have suggestions for district leadership, we're interested in that as well. So I have to do 2 things. I have to click over here. It worked. And then I have to click here. Okay, it didn't work. So our primary focus for many, many years has been, of course, on instructional training, which is appropriate for principals, but we've seen a need for operational support as well. And Neighborhood Schools Enrollment Options, we call ourselves NSEO. We understand that principals and staffs are working really, really hard, again, to accommodate families, as well as grow your own enrollment. And our enrollment policies are very complex. It's an accumulation of many decades of studying and board meetings and policy development, and it does get complicated sometimes. And so we appreciate that, and we're here to help. And I wanted to introduce you to my wonderful staff. A few of them are here today. Ernestina Hernandez is my administrative assistant to Bilingual, so she helps you out quite a bit. Glenda Howard from Down Under is our systems analyst. And we have Irene Rodriguez, our administrative aide Bilingual. She helps a lot of the enrollment clerks. Alma Diaz, also administrative aide Bilingual. Susan Thomas is a clerk typist 3. She's not here right now. She's been in our department for almost 2 decades, so she's got the most longevity in enrollment options. And then I have Carlos Garcia, clerk typist 3 Bilingual, the thorn among the roses, we call him in our office. And out today, Alicia Carlos is a clerk typist 3 Bilingual, and also, unfortunately in the hospital right now, is Karen Sloan, our 3rd clerk typist 3. history. So this is our staff that works really hard with the enrollment of 105,000 kids and processing over 12,000 choice applications and helping all of the school sites sort it all out. We have some learning areas today for you, and as a principal, I always felt like these issues were very mysterious. I really relied on my enrollment staff to do the job and not really bother me with it too much. And I expected them to keep me compliant with all policies and procedures. But what we found over the last couple of years with a lot of staffing adjustments, with layoffs and new folks coming in with very little training or background, many site staff had limited experience with enrollment and really are needing a lot more support and assistance, and so are a lot of our site administrators, and that's why we're here. So today we're going to focus on some of the big ticket enrollment topics, and then we'll spend a little bit of time on some of the other common items that are not applicable to every single school site, but nonetheless we get a lot of questions about them. And you will be able to link into the interactive Padlet feature up there if you want to use your, if you have access to your laptop right now. And you can just click on the link and then tap the little plus sign on your screen and type out your question. And if you want to, you can add your photo or you can remain anonymous. And we will try to respond to the questions, and I'll have some friends in the front row here that will let me know if we're accumulating any questions. And I think all of this will be available online later, so you can look at the questions and answers if that's helpful for you. And then if we have time at the end, there will be question and answer time as well. Okay, am I doing this right? So we have goals in our department. We have a mission statement and all that good stuff. And our main goal is to promote enrollment through superior service to our clientele, which includes families and school sites. You guys are all of our clients. And in balancing Vision 2020 and quality schools in every neighborhood with our legal and ethical obligations to provide choice, our mantra in neighborhood schools enrollment options is your neighborhood school may be very well your very best first choice. But if you have a different area that you're interested in, something in particular for your child, like a second language or fine arts focus or STEAM STEM, then San Diego Unified offers many different options for you. And we assist schools in navigating those tricky and complex scenarios. We work with site administrators and enrollment staff with those very occasional high-profile situations. That's every single day. And then we try to really work to help you minimize and eliminate opportunities for uniform complaints or negative publicity, and help us to stay above board, following policy and procedure, and make sure that we're implementing appropriate enrollment practice. So we're going to talk about neighborhood schools first. So our current district policy is that we accommodate all residents in their neighborhood school. And the only exception we're seeing right now to that would be at the elementary level with the new restructuring of special education and the reconfiguration of the mod severe classes, as well as some low incidence programs like deaf, hard of hearing, or visually impaired. Those kids that are in those that require those specialized settings, we might have to work with them to accommodate them. But by and large, the vast majority of our pupils can be accommodated at their resident school. And it's very important to remember that resident enrollment should be accommodated immediately or as quickly as possible, and at least within a very reasonable timeline, maybe the next day. We recognize that this can be a challenge for some of our super busy high schools in particular. We do receive inquiries from parents who are told to come back maybe a week later, sometimes longer than that, or they are asked to schedule an appointment for enrollment intake, but the law says that we need to enroll right away. So we know that that's a challenge, and so for our secondary schools, if pupils are missing transcripts, or we're concerned about grading issues, we recommend that you have a generic schedule for your students to follow, much like you would with an international pupil who's just shown up and you can't even interpret their schedule. Have that handy, and then allow your counseling staff to put together a schedule once you have the information that you need. We just want to make sure that enrollment is timely and that students aren't sitting at home with nothing to do. They need to be at school. The other new rule that's important to be aware of is there's new legislation regarding military enrollment, and verification of residency can be used with housing orders up to 6 months in advance. So if you have a lot of military families and you're kind of questioning the residency, if they have those housing orders and it's within 6 months, you can go ahead and enroll them as a resident, even if they're currently not in your attendance area. Our rule of thumb really is to err on the side of discretion rather than to deny enrollment, because we can always go back and fix it if we permit the enrollment, but there's no way to retroactively enroll kids and have them catch up on the time that they missed. And we don't want to chance a formal complaint. So the big message there is when residents present to you, enroll them as soon as you can. There's all kinds of wonderings and questions that come up with residency, and I probably get a couple of inquiries a day from principals. And because you are such awesome dynamic leaders and your schools are such wonderful places, parents want to be in your schools and they don't want to leave, even when they're not really entitled to enrollment as residents. And so that's when we have to look at California Ed Code and recognize that schools, actually principals, it says principals in the Ed Code, are required to verify residency. And so we have a verification process for that. And sometimes we find out through that process that, lo and behold, families really aren't residents, and sometimes there are clues, like they're late a lot or they're not picked up on time. Sometimes kids will come right out and tell you, oh, we moved and it takes us a half hour to get here. They give you a lot of clues. Sometimes they move out of our district boundaries, and so these are all important things to pay attention to. And even though as dedicated educators and school leaders, we're very empathetic, and we are tempted sometimes to just not pay attention to that. We want to allow the pupils to stay. Maybe we take some measures to keep them at our schools. It's really important to make sure that you are following policy and procedure. So there are cases sometimes when you've had a lot of success with a pupil, for example, and you've been working for a very long time with a certain family, and then you find out that they've moved, and gosh, you don't even want to let them go because you've had so much success with them, and you're reluctant to see them leave. It's still important to be aware that it is the fiscal responsibility of the district of residence to pay for the services and supports for that school. So that's our reality, and we have to be aware of it. If the resident district cannot support the pupil, then they can seek support from the enrolling district and reimburse that other district for the costs. So aside from our personal empathy, we have to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible for the pupils that we have enrolled in our schools. A lot of families don't even realize it's an issue. They think they can just stay, but and they don't realize that moving out of a neighborhood impacts the actual resident school, impacts their enrollment, impacts their staffing allocations. So that's, again, why it's really important to be on top of it. So if there is a question, You and your staff just need to inquire with the parent for a current verification document, like a utility bill or a rental agreement. And the law says that we can request a whole long list of items that are including but not limited to. So that gives you some flexibility if you think maybe somebody's bringing a document that they downloaded off the internet, for example, and it's not an authentic document. We've been looking at things like falsified rental and lease agreements, and when we see those and we're not able to verify that the person actually lives there, or the phone number doesn't work, or the person that they list as a landlord doesn't exist, then you can ask for other pieces of evidence. And again, that provides you some flexibility if you have questions about legitimacy of a document. It's a good practice to inform the parent. I think that home visits are conducted regularly to verify residency, especially if you're at a school that has impacted enrollment. And it's also important to clarify that families may not use a friend's or relative's address, even though we say this explicitly all over our website, and I know hopefully you are expressing that to your families as well. It's on our FAQs. When parents call, we tell them. There are still families that think they can use grandma's address. And again, this impacts not just your site, but it impacts the site where they should be enrolled. So it's important to follow up on those things. The tricky thing for principals is that you have to apply this practice equitably and across the board. You'd want to avoid any appearance of favoritism or discrimination. So residency verification really does need to be implemented uniformly. You can't expect some families to comply and then sort of turn your head and ignore other families. So you want to make sure that you're doing this across the board and uniformly. Some of the residency questions that come up have to do with if you have to enroll them when they're residents, even if. And so some of the even ifs are, find my notes here. Sometimes we're informed that the site will tell the parent, there's not enough space, so we can't enroll you. And what we have found is that the sites, by and large, have space. I think, well, we have Sarah sitting here, our demographer. We don't have one single school in our district right now that is at full physical capacity. So it would not be correct to tell a parent that you don't have space. What we find out when we investigate typically is that they would not be able to accommodate without reorganization. Or the site will tell the parent, oh, we don't have the program for your child. And that's not quite right either. We want to enroll first and then seek support if we need it. So your resident pupils are always entitled to enrollment, even if you're going to need to reorganize. Even if it's unclear why the pupil left the former school, you have some questions and wonderings about the family, and even if you're worried that your site does not have the special program to accommodate. So we understand those concerns, but again, your resident pupils are entitled to immediate enrollment, and the concerns are then secondary to our legal obligation to enroll. So in the case where you have a child with special needs who comes in and you're worried that you can't accommodate them, get in touch with special ed right away and they will assist you. And I think this is like a questions check-in point. Do we have any questions? Mm-hmm. At the end, you were very open to any other questions. Absolutely.
Okay. So you may have already addressed some of these questions.
Okay.
So the first is a scenario.
I love scenarios.
If a resident parent moves in the spring to another community, but they want to continue at the school/cluster, can they still attend after the choice window has closed?
So if a resident family moves after the choice window has closed in the spring sometime, the principal may, and we're going to get into this under choice because it's actually a choice question, kind of a combo. they can still apply for choice for the following school year, and the principal may permit them to remain enrolled provided you have space available. So that's the short answer. So if you have a resident family who moves in the middle of the year, but they want to stay and the principal is amenable to having them stay, they may finish the school year. But in order for them to continue in the subsequent year, they do have to apply for choice and be accepted. Some people think it's just apply for choice, but they have to be accepted too. Anything else?
The next was, if you could explain how the Declaration of Residency Verification form works.
I can. That was one of the ones I didn't put on our mini list, but the Declaration of Residency form is a form that parents can fill out. It is subject to penalty for perjury if a person puts fraudulent information on it. But if a parent, for example, shows up at your school and says, I'm living with my relative right now while I'm looking for housing, they don't have any bills to submit, then we can permit them to enroll with a declaration of residency, and it is a legal document, and they put the address down, and they sign the line declaring that this is true and valid information. And my recommendation to sites that are concerned that maybe it's not is that you do make the home visit and verify that they actually live at this residence, and then have your enrollment staff red flag the family and ask them maybe every 2 weeks, have you found permanent housing yet? And that way you can kind of follow up and make sure that they actually are living in your neighborhood. But it is a valid way to enroll, but it is also a way that folks will commonly try to circumvent residency and be fraudulent, and so it is important to follow up on it. Hope that answers the question.
Next question, complement to that. How long is that valid for?
It's valid until they move, until they get permanent residency.
Finally, do we require, and I believe you touched on this already, do we require that the student actually live at the residence that they are using their enrollment for?
Yes, we do. The caveat to that would be in the case of divorced parents and they share custody. If either parent resides in your attendance area, then the child is entitled to enrollment, and that's per California Ed Code. And I'm sure the presumption being that there's shared custody and that the pupil resides at least part-time with the parent who is in your attendance area. Okay. So now we're going to move on to choice. Yes, sure.
When you went back about talking about schools not denying students enrollment, what if you have a situation where a student is a TK eligible student? Your kinder classes are already maxed out at 24 and 25, but that TK student or parent wants to petition and go through the process of having a TK student placed in kinder. And say they do qualify, say they're teaching at the right level, or it's determined that their social emotional level that they could function in the classroom. If we're capped, can we still place that student into kinder? I mean, or can you say to that parent, our kinder classrooms are full, we'd like to accommodate you, but I mean, what do you do in those situations? Because it's increasing, the request is increasing, and we do have, especially at my site, a lot of kids coming in, reading at really high levels, performing at very high levels, so that's kind of where I'm finding myself.
Right. Many of our elementary schools have TKK combos, so that does help with the flexibility issue. The good thing is that it's a process for a TK who's age appropriately placed in TK to be evaluated, assessed, observed, have meetings with the parent and the teacher, and come to a group consensus that this child should be in kindergarten. There are some things some schools do that are creative, which include deploying a pupil for specific subject matter like math and literacy. That's one strategy I would suggest. Otherwise, you're basically looking at reorganization. So I think that's something that I would noodle with my area superintendent with. And if you want to loop me in too, I'd be happy to help you out. But yeah, that would be a complex scenario for sure. So we do get a lot of choice questions, and the main ones being who needs to apply and who does not need to apply. And we try every year to expand on the information that we put out to parents in our school messenger messages and in the principal letter that we provide for you that you can put your name on to clarify for parents if they do or do not need to apply. And again, we get a ton of questions about choice. The important point to remember is that California Ed Code requires that choice be a fair and equitable process. And why does it even exist? And so in your leadership courses, I'm sure you all learned about the Carlin case that originated right here in San Diego, probably when some of us were in kindergarten and some of us weren't even born yet, like my boss. But it actually exists to meet integration goals and provide parents with options. And again, choice was one of the main strategies that our district came up with to address the Carlin case and to resolve it. And there was a court order placed on us, and we developed the VEEP, magnet, and basic choice options for parents so that we could help with integration issues. And then the order itself was lifted, I think, around the year 2000, a couple years early, because we were doing such a great job. You guys were doing a great job, and we had a lot of success. So it's important to remember that choice is actually a right and not a privilege. The law says that we have to offer choice. We have to offer parents the opportunity to apply. So just to quickly run down who needs to apply, it's basically any non-resident who's interested in attending your site, including children of employees. So your employees or employees in your cluster, if they want to go to your school, they have to apply. Younger siblings of currently enrolled choice pupils. So we get a lot of parents that think if one pupil choiced in, then all the brothers and sisters get to come free. They don't have to apply. Not true. They get priority, and they will very likely be accepted, but they still have to apply. Non-residents attending pre-K on your campus, whether it's an ECE or a private preschool on your campus, they have to apply, and we do give them priority. Anyone who's currently in a choice magnet program and wants continuity to the next level, the continuity is not automatic. So if you're in a fine arts elementary school and you want to go to the fine arts middle school, you have to apply. And then if you want to go from the fine arts middle to the fine arts high schools, you have to apply. It doesn't automatically happen. And then basically any currently enrolled resident, and this is the big one and why I have it in bold, any currently enrolled resident who has moved or is planning to move out of the attendance area. And we did a lot of publicity around this particular piece this year, and happily many parents planning to move did apply. In some cases they didn't move, and so we adjusted your seating lists and we removed them because they didn't move after all, but they do need to apply to stay. Who does not need an application? Any resident already enrolled in your school who's not moving does not need to apply to stay. And our first year with the new Power School choice enrollment process, we did have a lot of people just apply to stay because they wanted to make sure that they were going to be able to stay. Anybody who's currently enrolled as a choice pupil already and they haven't moved out of our district boundaries, they don't need to apply. They can move within the district and still retain their choice status, but once they move to La Mesa or Lemon Grove or Escondido, they have to apply for choice to remain. And any currently enrolled choice pupil who is articulating in a cluster does not need to apply for choice. They articulate automatically, just like a resident. That's Alexis. Okay, there we go. Who's asking that question? Any currently enrolled choice pupil who is articulating in a cluster does not need to apply for choice to articulate. So if somebody applied to your school via choice and was enrolled, they don't need to apply to move on to Roosevelt or to move on to San Diego. No, because you're not a magnet school. Okay? Now, if they applied to Roosevelt as a magnet student and then they want to apply to San Diego High and want to continue to San Diego High, they have to reapply because it's a magnet program. It's a little confusing. It's not confusing at all. It's totally confusing. We know that.
Okay.
Yes.
Kind of muttering means that we don't have clarity. To the degree that we feel like we need to have clarity. So like IB, I feed into Roosevelt, if I've got a kid on choice in my IB program, he automatically goes into Roosevelt with no additional paperwork, correct?
I'm going to double check on that, but I think they have to apply to articulate to, well, where are you? Are you at McKinley? Well, they go there anyway. That's your resident middle school as well, so they don't need to apply.
Okay.
That's a resident articulation.
Choice into McKinley, or
If they're choiced into McKinley from outside of the cluster and they want to go to Roosevelt, they have to reapply because that's magnet continuity.
but if they're inside,
But if they're a resident, they don't.
okay, if there's a Garfield kid, which is still in my cluster, but they choiced into McKinley,
Mhm.
want to go, well, I guess then I need to know Garfield. Does Garfield have years of life?
Yeah, we have a magnet continuity chart that's available on our website, and I'll double check on it, but pretty much all the IBs, the language schools, and the arts and STEAM that you have to apply to get into, and they're designated as magnet or special program schools, you have to apply to go to the next level if it's not your resident school. So the next kind of tricky area is identifying pupils as choice when they're not really choice. And we see a lot of this. And I understand why. We want to keep kids. It's an extra thing to have to do or call a parent and tell them they have to do it. It's more work. But we can't just make them choice. And many times my staff will take questions from timid enrollment clerks who say, my principal told me to just make them choice, and I don't think I'm supposed to do this. So we try to help them through what the process really is. So we know, again, it's a tempting remedy when you have a student enrolled and you want to keep them, and then you discover they don't live in your neighborhood, or they moved out of the district. It's really tempting to just say, go into demographics and Power School and change the boundary exception to choice, because your clerks have the capacity to do that. They have the authorization to do that. But when they do that and it's not backed up with data and they didn't actually apply for choice, it can cause problems later down the line. So it's very important that we not just call kids choice unless they've actually applied and been accepted via choice. So changing the boundary exception in Power School is not the remedy. It's not the process. When a family moves out of the attendance area and does not apply for choice to remain, but they're permitted to, I mentioned earlier, what this can actually do is create a negative impact on your colleagues, on schools around you. There's some neighborhoods where there's a lot of movement, and some schools have permitted kiddos to stay and not had them apply for choice to remain, and lo and behold, their neighboring schools' enrollment is going down while theirs is going up, and that's because they're capturing somebody else's resident enrollment outside of the process. And so we want to make sure that we're cognizant about that. And I know it's hard when you're at your school and you're thinking about your school's enrollment and what it means to your site and your allocations, but if I could implore you to try to look at the big district picture, which is what we look at every day, and recognize that when you just make a kid choice, you really are negatively impacting your neighbor. Identifying a pupil as choice from our vantage point is certifying to the state and federal government that the pupil went through the process. And we do get audited, and we don't want to be found out of compliance. We want to make sure that we're not at risk of litigation by a family who maybe wants to choice into your school but can't get in because you're too full with unofficially choiced pupils. And again, we want to make sure that remedies applied to enrollment are done equitably and that all children are enrolled appropriately. So, we're trying to help you avoid setting yourself up and being accused of maybe discriminatory practice or not being fair with your enrollment. And we want to make sure that you're giving parents the correct information. So what we're doing on our side, as when these situations pop up, we will contact the school when we find out there's maybe a group of kids that are labeled choice, they're non-resident schools, but they never applied, and we will assist your staff in applying remedy and fixing it so that you are in compliance. Depending on how long the pupil's there, we will never say they can't come back. We will always work with you. We look at every case individually, but what we try to do is look at the length of time the family has been there. If it's possible for us to, if we can look and we see there was a history that maybe they did apply for choice but they weren't accepted, we can fix that. We can go back in history and fix our records and make it legitimate. And we also want to make sure that we're educating your staff for future enrollment situations. So we're kind of doing this school by school. We're running a district-wide report right now to see if there are any schools that have large quantities of kids that are identified as choice who really aren't. And then we'll be working with the staffs to apply remedy for that. And so hopefully not too many of you. Everybody has like maybe one or two, and that's not a big deal. But when you've got large groups, enough that impacts allocations or, helps you keep or earn additional staff, and maybe a school in your neighborhood lost staff, those are the kinds of situations we're trying to fix. Yes?
Thinking about students articulating to the next level. They're already choice, they're in the cluster, they go to the next school. What if the placement and appeal because puts a kid in your school, say sixth grade,
That's a good question.
they go choice for seventh, and if they go through your 3 years in middle school, they articulate to the high school about
Placement and appeal is a very unique situation, but placement and appeals enrollment are considered permanent, and we treat them like residents. So typically placement and appeals as a result of an expulsion or some other legal process, and there's a reason why the child should not be at the prior school. So we enroll them, or we assist them with identifying a site that can enroll, and then they stay and they articulate just like a resident. And siblings have sibling rights as well, so we treat them like residents. Sure.
similar situation, but principal to principal thing.
Different. I'm going to address that. That's the informal site-initiated placement, and I'm going to address that a little farther along. So maybe you can hold on to your question. If I don't answer it, I'll get back to you. Okay. The other choice wonderings, and these are kind of the harder ones. When pupils are enrolled via choice, one of the questions that we get a lot is, do I have to keep this pupil? And what can I do? They're late every day, or they have all these issues, and I think they would be more successful in their neighborhood school. And as a former principal, I totally get that, and I understand. But even when a choice pupil is high profile, has academic issues, behavioral or attendance issues, the short answer is yes, you have to keep the pupil. We treat choice pupils like we treat our residents, and so you want to implement all the same supports and services that you would to a pupil who lives in your neighborhood. Now, when I was a principal and I had choice pupils who had chronic attendance issues, and really attendance is the thing I think that's best to focus on when you're meeting with a parent. You can certainly suggest to the parent or ask them, don't you think that maybe it would be easier for you to get your child to school on time, blah, 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 if you were in your neighborhood school, and see if you can, have some influence that way. But kind of what I saw, and I don't know about the rest of you, but many times pupils who have attendance issues at a choice school also have attendance issues at their resident school. It didn't really always result in a difference. So it's really best for the school that is hosting the child, whether they're choice or resident, to address it as you would your regular pupils, initiate the SART process, work with the family to help them with whatever their issues are, go to RTI, come up with intervention plans, but you do need to treat them as residents. So your resident enrollees choice pupils who are residents of San Diego Unified must be treated as resident pupils in all cases. The sites, again, offer the same supports and services that you do to your neighborhood students. The only time this is not the case is when they have applied and been enrolled as choice from out of district. Those we call inter-district enrollees. They come from one of the 49 other districts that we're in contract with. And there is an agreement with our other districts that these pupils must maintain good attendance, grades, and citizenship. So if you're having some concerns about a pupil who does not live in San Diego Unified boundaries, and you want to know what your options are, what those pupils and parents' options are, contact us because, again, we call it the IAP, the Inter-District Attendance Permit. Does require good attendance, behavior, and academics, and it can be revoked, and there's no appeal, and the county supports us on that. The only caveat to that, and this is why it's very important to know your students and where they're coming from, is if the pupil enrolled via an IAP has an IEP. The IEP trumps the IAP. If the concerns you have any relation to the child's disability, then our legal department recommends that we maintain enrollment because the parent can appeal it, and if it went to the County Board of Education, which appeals go to them after me, then they would probably direct us to keep the child because the issues are around their disability. So again, get to know your kiddos. Remember too that Ed Code provides the right to choose. It's a right and it's not a privilege. So I've heard many folks say to me, oh, it's a privilege to come to my school. And it is a privilege to go to your awesome schools, but legally it's a right. Again, the permit stipulates that inter-district enrollees have to maintain all those positive things. So if you're having concerns about a kiddo who lives out of district, feel free to call us and we'll help you out. And I'll talk a little bit more about inter-district enrollment shortly. A lot of people ask me about priorities and what are the priorities. And it's an interesting question because we get lots of suggestions for new priorities and suggestions for omitting and deleting priorities. We have 8 levels of priority, and they're listed in the PowerPoint in order. The first one is magnet continuity. So if you're a magnet school and your kids are applying to the next level, they have top priority. After that is the only priority required by law, and that's sibling. So California Ed Code does require that we provide sibling priority for choice applications. We added the children of employees priority because we thought, why not help our own people enroll their children in schools near where they work. So it's for a 0.5 or higher FTE, and it's only within the geographical cluster of assignment. So it doesn't mean that we can all apply to Language Academy and get our kids in. You have to be working in that cluster, and you can apply to any school in that cluster, and you'll have priority. Our Board of Education has worked over a couple of decades on these priorities, and after a lot of deliberation, established these 8 levels of priority, really thinking about fair and equitable practice and taking into account all kinds of scenarios, there's that word, and things and different district-wide impacts. And one of the issues that we've been asked about is why can't we have sibling priority for legacy pupils, kind of like legacy applicants to universities? And that is something that the board did not support. So I'm going into my choice priorities wonderings. Whoops. And a lot of times I'll be asked by a principal, well, why can't this kid have a priority? Why can't this pupil have priority? And again, the sentiment of the Board of Education in the past has been that we have to be very careful about establishing priorities because what we could actually be doing is creating a discriminatory practice. So the most common questions I get are continuing pupil who moves out of the attendance area. Why can't they have priority to stay? And our Board of Ed looked at that and thought, well, here's a possible downfall. They could all apply to really highly desired schools by establishing temporary residence and then move. And pretty soon you're a school full of non-residents, and then you can't even accommodate your residents. And you're not permitting appropriate choice for all the other families who would like to have an opportunity to apply to get into that school. So the Board of Ed determined that that would not be a good practice. Pupils of siblings who will not be concurrently enrolled, or we call them legacy pupils, or the other question is pupils of siblings in the same cluster of choice. And again, our board did look at those two ideas, and they just determined that this priority, again, would create inequitable access, and it's really not as compelling as having two siblings in the same school. And me being a parent in this district, sometimes that's not even a helpful thing to have that kind of priority, because schools have different schedules within the same cluster. So, you know, you're driving one to school at 7:30, and then you're driving the other one to school at 9 o'clock, and they're in the same cluster. The legacy priority might not even be that helpful. But our board determined that that would not be something that we would look at, because to help families, it was more about same school, same schedule, and that would be helpful for parents. The last one was pupil or parent of pupil who has a serious life circumstance or a tragedy in their family, and we get maybe a couple hundred of these requests a year. The parent's been sick, the child's been sick, somebody died, all kinds of compelling circumstances. And because every situation is so unique, it was determined that this type of priority would not be appropriate, because it would be very hard to document, assess, collect data. How do you get medical records, things like that? And so it was determined that these kinds of extreme cases, in the real extreme cases, we could handle them on an individual basis, but we do not provide priorities for life circumstances. So now's another question time. Yay.
More about tracking those. Given that you've got about 45 minutes, but with one meaty topic to go, smaller,
Okay. Absolutely.
Are you okay if we go through the third piece?
Yeah.
And then we will go the smaller pieces and then put the Padlet questions so you can respond here. And then also, are you okay after the session to go back into the Padlet and also make sure that those responses
Absolutely.
will live
No
on?
way. I'm heading for the hills as soon as this is over. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I'll be here. Yeah, I'll stay. I'll stay for extra questions. Okay. So we're going to look at interdistrict enrollment now. And did you know, I didn't know until I had this job, that there are 42 school districts in San Diego County, but we actually have contracts with 49 districts. So we contract also with Riverside County. We have families that come all the way down from Menifee and other areas, which is very interesting. They love us so much, and we're happy about that. So what is interdistrict enrollment? Again, there's close to 50 districts in our San Diego and Riverside County, and we have legal contracts with all of these districts and to provide cross-enrollment. And each of our districts receives ADA for the pupils who are enrolled from a different district. And because California Ed Code requires a valid permit for all of these pupils, we monitor it, and we encourage you and hope that you direct your staffs to really run a non-resident report to verify that all of your out-of-district pupils do have interdistrict attendance permits on file. So interdistrict enrollment is governed by California Ed Code, and the county office does monitor it and checks in with us on it. We have about 3,000 kiddos that are enrolled in San Diego Unified right now on interdistrict attendance permits, and that's about 2% of our overall enrollment, and the law requires that valid permits are on file at all times. So that's required every time a child changes levels. So when they go from elementary to middle, they have to apply for a new one, and when they go from middle school to high school, they have to apply for a new interdistrict permit. The application process includes going to your district of residence and being approved to leave, and then coming to the district of enrollment. And when we're the district of enrollment, we first verify that the pupil's been accepted via choice. and then we look at the permit, and we vet it very carefully. If the child, the parent has to fill out a pretty comprehensive application and include pertinent information such as attaching IEPs and 504 plans. We ask if they've been expelled from their from their resident district and other questions. And if anything is determined to be fraudulent, we do not permit them to enroll. But we have all that information so that we can collaborate with other departments such as special ed to make sure that we're able to accommodate the pupils. The application process, again, includes having several copies of the application. One goes to the parent, one goes to the site for inclusion in the cumulative records folder, and one goes to the district of residence. And again, it's very important to follow up on any pupils that you think may be residing out of district, and especially at sites nearest our district borders where it tends to be more common. Some families don't even realize they're not in our district. I used to be vice principal at Carver, and we were right there on the Lemon Grove boundary, and they built some military homes there, and all those families came over because we were right next door. But they were actually out of district, and so you have to make sure that your families are actually your families. There are some common questions that come up with interdistrict enrollment. It includes, again, families residing out of our boundaries who apply for choice to enroll here, as well as families who've moved out and wish to remain. So if you have a family who's moved out, again, you can let them stay till the end of the school year, but if they moved out of the district, they have to get a permit within 10 school days. So it's really important to keep up on where your families are living. The families who reside out of district are accepted via choice and have to obtain the approved IAP to complete the enrollment process. And again, we work through every one of those applications. And then the latter has to obtain the permit within 10 school days to complete the school year. If they've moved out of district and they want to stay at your school, they have to apply for choice and be accepted, and then apply for another interdistrict attendance permit, because the one we gave them just to finish the school year is only good until the end of the school year. Why is this important? It's important because it affects funding. We want to ensure that all of our out-of-district pupils have interdistrict attendance permits or IAPs on file, because there's big dollars connected to each one of those little people. And the piece that's concerning for us is that if it's determined that we have been enrolling pupils and not having them file their IAPs, the resident district can then file a complaint with the state against us and recoup back ADA. And in some cases, we have found children who have been enrolled in our district their whole career, and now they're a sophomore or junior in high school, and they've never lived here. And that's a lot of ADA. So we don't want that to happen. We want to stay compliant with California Ed Code. So if you have any rumblings of a kiddo who's out of district, again, we look at every single application, and it's important also to be aware that district residents always have priority for choice enrollment. And although we welcome out-of-district applicants in the choice process, they have the lowest priority. So they are the kiddos who get placed very last after all of the residents have been placed. So in a given choice year, we might seat about 35 kids from out of district, just depending on where they've applied. Okay, that was the end of the top 3 biggies. Did we want to do questions now or just at the very end? Whoop. At the very end? How many questions are there?
There's quite a few building members. I think you should just put them on the screen here.
Okay. Well, then I'll go through the other common enrollment wonderings, which are age requirements, homeless foster, the informal site-initiated placement, child care affidavits, international pupils, and referrals to and from charter schools. Okay. So we are frequently asked about waivers for birth date requirements, and there are none. We don't have waivers for TKK birth date requirements. We follow California Ed Code regarding initial enrollment, and we don't make exceptions to that. We get that question asked almost weekly, and folks write to the board members and beg and plead, and principals occasionally will offered to make an exception, but we don't want to crack that door open. We want to stick to the ed code on that. Our elementary principals, I'm sure, are very aware that pupils who are not 5 by December 2nd are referred to our early childhood program. And we're also noticing a trend whereby parents are delaying enrollment to perhaps gain an advantage in high school, either in athletics or academics, and we do not support this either. So if a family comes to you and says, I don't want to enroll my child, I'd like to wait a year, or my child's kindergarten age and I'd like to enroll them in TK, we do not support that. They need to be enrolled at the appropriate grade level. If after a reasonable amount of time and assessments and data collection, the principal, parent, and teachers all agree that this child would be better placed in the grade level ahead or below, then you can take the proper steps to do that. The only exception to age placement is pupils who come to us from a different school system with records, and we place them in accordance of what the school records indicate. And this is common for pupils coming to us from other countries or coming to us from private school settings. So if they have a report card or enrollment information that shows that they need to be in a certain grade, that's where we put them. The other concern is 18-year-olds. I don't know if we have any secondary, we have, I know Ernie's here. Sometimes we're hearing about 18-year-olds being disenrolled when they turn 18 and being given information on adult ed and being referred to adult ed to complete their high school diploma, and we do not support that. 18-year-olds are entitled to continued enrollment, and we understand that there are challenges with having a legal adult on your campus who maybe is high profile. But in these cases, it's very important to remember that the pupil is also entitled to due process, and disenrollment is not a strategy for due process. So we just want to make sure that our high schools are enabling our pupils to stay and earn that diploma even though they turn 18. Our legal office has told us that this practice could very easily be inappropriately applied and maybe disproportionately impact certain groups of students, and we don't want to go down that road. For youth in transition issues, we have an office that we work with, and that's the Children and Youth in Transition for homeless, foster, and military enrollment. And for support with any of these types of enrollment, you can contact Children and Youth in Transition, but our two departments do collaborate a lot, and we support each other with this, and either one of us can answer your questions about youth in transition. The important thing for our schools that have a high military population is to be aware of the new SB, I can't see, 3455, that they have the right to enroll remotely, and so they can go into InfoSnap and do the online enrollment. And again, in all three scenarios, we say enroll first and ask questions later. We don't want to deny eligible pupils the right to enrollment. Yes?
We're seeing an increase in families clinging homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to bypass the process, are you seeing that district-wide?
I wouldn't say I'm personally seeing that district-wide. That'd probably be a good question for Jennifer. I would think in the state of our economy, we probably are seeing more families doubling up and in temporary housing. But there are manners by which you can request verification. HUD issues homelessness documents, and there are transitional housing places that also issue documents of homelessness. And if they're doubling up, then you can conduct a home visit to verify that they're actually doubling up.
More than that, is they're saying they're moving out of their vehicle, and this is the, yeah.
And, right, okay. So I would probably connect with Jennifer Cornell on that, but we do have some families that live in vehicles, and they're entitled to enrollment nearest to wherever they're sleeping at night, wherever they're parking at night, or in the school of origin. But it doesn't mean you can go to any school that you want to. So, and that's one of the questions that comes up a lot where are they entitled to enroll? So they're entitled to enroll in the school of origin or the school nearest to where they're sleeping at night. And again, there are different ways you can verify homelessness. And essentially, homeless pupils are entitled to continued enrollment and benefits through the school year in which they get secure housing. So even if they get housing on the first day of school, they can be treated as homeless and get those benefits throughout the school year. The biggest question we get is, can't they just enroll anywhere they want? And we have some families that believe that as well. And the answer to that is no. Pupils in transition are not guaranteed enrollment anywhere. That's a common misperception. Again, it has to be the school of origin or closest to where they're sleeping at night. And overall, our goal in working with our youth in transition is to provide stability. So again, having been a principal, I understand it's difficult. I had my fair share of homeless families, and it's a sad situation, but we want to work to provide as much stability for those children as possible, and Children and Youth in Transition is available to help you with that. Informal site-initiated placement, which the gentleman in the back was asking me about, or ISIP. So there's SIP and there's ISIP. And it would be great if we could change that, but I think SIP has been around for decades, and we're kind of stuck with that. ISIP is what our office manages, and it used to be called SIP. SIP used to be the broad term that we used for any kid that moved to a different school other than their resident school, not through choice. But ISIP, which is what Neighborhood Schools Enrollment Options works with, was created for those unique situations whereby the principal and the family think it's in the best interest of a pupil to have a change of school, and it's not possible to do choice. The important points to remember are the ones that are up there on the slide. It's only site initiated. Our office will never tell a parent about ISIP. It's not PIP. It's not parent-initiated, it's SIP, site-initiated. And it differs from SIP because SIP is the formal process that is the result of a expulsion hearing or other legal process. SIPs are determined by a panel. They identify the school where the child is going to move to, and the only involvement our office has may be around capacity. Can a school site accommodate this pupil? And we say yes or no. But the ISIP we facilitate, and again, it's an informal process. We never suggest it to a parent. When parents come to us demanding a new school in the middle of the year, the first thing we ask them is if they have spoken with the principal and if they've tried to resolve their concern. And many times it's yes, and sometimes it's no, they don't want to. So we will give them their options, which are go back to the school and try to work it out with the administrator, apply for choice for the following year. We also talk to them about other options in our district, such as Mount Everest, homeschooling. We tell them about atypical or alternative sites that might be recommended based on the pupil's needs. And if it's really close to the end of the year, we might suggest a contract to finish their work at home. But we always contact you first, and we always let you know if we think an ISIP is something you might want to consider, but we never suggest it to the parent. So just be aware of that. ISIP is temporary. It's not permanent. It cannot be used to circumvent choice. It's only good till the end of the next school year within which they can apply for choice, and there are no other privileges or priorities attached to it, so siblings can't get in or anything like that. It's something that we're looking at because there may be ways we can refine ISIP. It's becoming a very prevalent manner by which principals try to resolve enrollment situations. We just want to make sure we're tracking kids and we know where they are and why they're there. And so I wanted just to make sure that we went over the ISIP process. Did you have any questions about that? Yes. Oh, I see Ryan.
I think you might be seeing an increase because I think sometimes quality assurance sees that as a solution to a problem, so they suggested to the principal, to the incoming principal, to accept the student.
Okay, that's good to know. We're right next door to quality assurance, and we work very closely together, and we've had those conversations where ISIP is not to be recommended to the parent, and it's been memorialized. So hopefully you're not seeing it as much this school year if at all. And if you do, maybe let me know. The ISIP applications have to come through our office to be approved, and we've maybe done a dozen of them so far this school year. So there shouldn't be any other ones floating around out there that we don't know about. Child care affidavit enrollment is a common question from our elementary families or elementary principals, and that is more rare, but we do get questions about it. Some families see it as an opportunity to enroll in their preferred school if they didn't get accepted via choice. And so you just need to remember the important points about it are that it cannot be used to circumvent choice. It also can't be used if the child care is on your campus. It has to be private or off-campus child care. Why are you laughing? And that childcare has to be in your attendance area. It can't be for childcare outside of your attendance area. And we have had some schools that, by some misunderstanding, were enrolling kids via childcare affidavits whose childcare was being provided in a completely different attendance area, and again, impacting that school's resident enrollment. So we want to make sure that we're following the rules here. It has to be renewed annually, and you can't renew it until your neighborhood enrollment is stabilized, till your resident enrollment is stabilized. So I always recommend, if you have any child care affidavit enrollment, have that parent apply for choice right away so that they can have a good chance of getting in the next year, because it's not guaranteed. There are no articulation rights to the next level, and it stops at 5th grade. We've had a couple middle schools ask us about child care affidavit, but we don't provide that. And again, it should not be used as a method to grow your enrollment because it is temporary and it impacts your neighbors. International exchange enrollment really is specific to high schools, but I did want to bring it up because there have been some questions about it in recent months. International exchange enrollment is monitored by the California Department of Justice and Homeland Security. So there are really important reasons why we have a process for it and why the central office needs to be aware of all international pupils on our campuses. We make sure that pupils are properly vetted and that they're sponsored by state-recognized agencies and not by, fly-by-night companies. You should not enroll any international exchange pupils who have not been referred to you by our office, because we vet their applications. We make sure that they have the skills to be successful at your schools, and we make a recommendation directly to the principal. Principal has the final say. In most cases, our principals are very welcoming of our international enrollment pupils. You want to be very cautious about agencies that contact you directly and try to enroll directly with you or schedule long-term visits, because those are not endorsed by the district and they're not supported by the district. Sometimes agencies will offer gifts, free trips, money, other payments, other benefits, and it would not be appropriate to take advantage of any of those offers. When I have asked questions with some of these agencies, they immediately offer me a bunch of free stuff. And I know in my gut, sounds good, but I'm not going to do it because it's not appropriate. We want to avoid even the appearance of questionable practice, and we don't want to be accepting things in exchange for some other benefit. So just be very cautious and let me know if you hear from any agencies who are trying to work directly with you. We make sure that all the agencies we work with are vetted by the California Department of Justice, and we always make sure that there's a good programmatic and academic connection to why they're coming to visit you. It's not just for vacation. There should be a good academic reason. And following our process, make sure provides that safeguards are in place for all of the minors that are on our campuses, and also keeps us out of trouble with our bargaining units in case there might be some concerns about having an extra batch of kids on campus for a short period of time. So I just wanted to make sure that we reviewed that. With charter pupil enrollment, we're noticing a bit of a disconnect. Our charter schools are part of, they reside in our district, and we work with them, and they work with us. And there's been a little bit of a disconnect with some staff who will counsel pupils out of San Diego Unified and recommend a charter school setting when our district has all the resources and supports available for these pupils. And this tends to happen mainly at the secondary level where kiddos are credit deficient and parents are being counseled into enrolling in a different school setting. And is it okay to refer to the nearest charter? I would say what you need to do first is make sure you investigate the wide array of supports and services that we have for our pupils right here in our own district and exhaust those before we look at any other out-of-district options. So just be very cautious about that. We don't want to be losing enrollment. We want to be growing our enrollment. And so we want to be very judicious about the kinds of recommendations we make to our families. One of the questions I get from principals is, why do I have to take students who were not selected by a charter or were disenrolled? And maybe the principal will tell me, gosh, I'm kind of suspicious. I don't know why they left. And why doesn't the charter want this pupil? And we understand those concerns, but again, all residents are entitled to enrollment. And as a public school system, we cannot discriminate. We have to enroll those pupils. Those are our pupils. So we encourage sites, if you receive a pupil from a charter school setting or a private school setting, and there's kind of a mystery as to why they're on your doorstep, contact that school. I contact the charter schools and private schools all the time to ask questions about families. I've never had any problem. They're very kind and helpful and give us all the information that we need. We just want to make sure that we, again, are working to welcome our families when they show up, and remember that all residents are entitled to enrollment. We've had questions about pupils who've been expelled from charter schools, and because our board is not the party that conducts the expulsion, it's considered an independent activity, and the pupil is still entitled to enrollment here. Again, you can do your due diligence and research it and request the information. You can use that information to develop a rehab plan for an intake meeting with that pupil, but we don't implement another LEA's expulsion process. So we just need to work with that pupil and help them to be successful in our setting as well. So now it's time for Red Robin questions and answers, and I just also wanted to let you know that as the old admin procedures are being phased out, if you go and you look on the admin procedure pages, you'll see that some of them you can't access anymore. They're being replaced by the administrative, operational, and informational circulars. We have all of ours posted on our web pages in the staff portal, so if you have questions about enrollment that you used to look at the old admin procedures for, you can look at the circulars now. But we are coming up with a document, a helpful document that will kind of put it all together for you and hopefully have that available for 2018-19 school year for your reference. So I'll still answer questions, but I wanted to make sure that you had our contact information. And my cell number is in that handbook that was passed out to all principals, but I'll give it to you now. But don't call me after 10 o'clock. My cell is 858-722-7156. I was kidding. You can call me whenever you want. Sometimes I will answer in the middle of the night, but I usually turn it off after 10. We do have a new phone system in our office, and I apologize that for about a week it wasn't operating correctly. But now, when you call, if you input your employee ID number or your staff inputs their employee ID number, the call gets routed to a staff member. So hopefully you get your questions addressed a little bit more quickly. And you can always call my line, which is 260-2419. And that rings directly to my desk. Yes. Oh, what did I do? How'd that happen? I didn't do that.
So first question.
Oh.
Does an IAP need to be completed annually?
No. That's the answer. No, it's through the level. So the only time it needs to be resubmitted is if they moved to yet another school district. So if they come in as an elementary or a middle school pupil, it's valid until they exit that level. They have to renew it at the next level.
And by level, you mean like
Elementary, middle, and high. Yes.
Next question.
What
If
about-
if a choice student wants to return to their school of residence, what is the process?
That's a great question. We have a process for that. At the beginning of the school year, if a choice student within the first 4 weeks wants to return to the school of residence, they may do so, no questions asked, no paperwork required. After the first 4 weeks of school, we have a request to return to neighborhood school form. The parent fills it out. It doesn't involve the choice school at all. The parent fills it out. They can request it from you, and they submit it to the school of residence. Then the principal may look at their own enrollment situation, and they can say yes or no. They do not have to accommodate the pupil. The only time they have to accommodate the pupil is if transportation is an issue. So if the parent says, I can't get my kid to the school of choice, I can only get my kid to your school, then they become your child. Which one am I reading?
Let's go with, do choice/magnet students get transportation? Aside from special education students, who gets transportation?
I'm not in charge of that yet. I still have a few weeks to go. Okay, transportation is limited. We transport mostly magnet and VEEP pupils, and then we transport special ed pupils who have transportation written as a related service in their IEP. So we have what we call VEEP patterns that were established for the integration goals, and parents can apply for a VEEP or a magnet school, and then our transportation department works very closely with our department. We look at all the pupils who were accepted, and we put as many kids on the buses within the resources we have to transport them to the VEEP or magnet school. In most cases, all those children are transported, but we do have some guidelines that we follow. There has to be a minimum of 25 pupils on each bus, so we have minimum ridership guidelines, and there was another one, minimum ridership, and I can't remember what the other one. Oh, at least you have to live at least 5 miles away. So when pupils are admitted to a VEEP or magnet school site, the enrollment clerk fills out the transportation form, has the parents sign it, submit it to the transportation department, and then they will work over the next couple of months to put together the routes. Once the buses are at capacity, though, then there becomes a wait list, theoretically. It hasn't happened yet, but we're working to try to provide transportation to all our VEEP magnet kiddos. Choice pupils do not get transported at all. And pupils with IEPs with transportation as a related service, if they apply for choice, they lose that related service. They only get transportation to their neighborhood school.
So that's a significant amount of detail that is probably best filled in afterwards.
Sure. Yeah, I know. Just rattle it off, right?
Next question. There's a question, what's the difference between choice and magnet? With a follow-up question, is enrollment at choice/magnet guaranteed through 12th grade, even if they moved? I believe you addressed this, but there's
Right.
another follow-on question. I believe that was also addressed verbally.
The difference between choice and magnet is that magnet is a type of choice. So the umbrella is choice, and under choice is plain old choice to any school that you're interested in. VEEP, which is the Voluntary Enrollment Exchange Program, used to be Voluntary Ethnic Enrollment Program, and Magnet, which is the specialized programs. So they're all choice, but then there's VEEP and Magnet underneath. And do choice magnet student, okay, we already did that. We already did declaration of residency.
I think the follow-up clarification would be, and I think folks would appreciate just one more time, the differences between where you live and the magnet matriculation path versus if you're choiced in the magnet matriculation path.
Okay. Most of we have dedicated magnets and we have neighborhood magnets, so it's a little bit confusing there. Dedicated magnets are 100% application, and with dedicated magnets, I forgot where I'm going with this. What was the question again? Which one is it?
Yes, so pulling up my screen again. There's a scenario here.
Okay, that might help me.
Might not see. Ah. So if a third grader is a choice student at elementary, do they have to reapply for middle school for choice during their 5th grade year?
If they're a choice, where is that question?
Lower left.
Okay. If a third grader is a choice student at elementary, do they have to, if they're choice, no. If it's plain choice and you're not a specialized program, you're not a magnet school, they can articulate to the next level as choice. Choice pupils are treated like residents. If it's a magnet program, okay, now I remember. If it's a magnet program, it's program continuity. It's a specialized program such as fine arts, foreign language, STEM, IB, they have to apply to the next level, but not plain old choice, neighborhood, a regular comprehensive school. They don't have to reapply, they can articulate. But so basically, if you're a principal at a magnet school at the elementary or middle level, your pupils who have been enrolled via choice through magnet need to apply to go to the next level. Or they get automatically rerouted to their neighborhood school.
Thank you. Marceline, do we accept IAPs for students with an IEP?
Yes, we do. Remember, first parents apply for choice, and we invite all families all around the county to apply for choice to our schools. When they apply, we ask them, does your child have an IEP? We cannot discriminate against any pupil with an IEP, but we ask for information only so that if the child ends up getting seated at your school, you can make plans and preparation to receive this child. Once they get accepted via choice, they have to submit the IAP, and on the IAP, they have to attach the IEP. It's alphabet soup. I meet with special ed, and we review the pupil's IEP, and if it's an IEP that can be implemented in our district and the pupil was legitimately accepted via choice, we work to find the appropriate placement for that pupil. And if it's at your school, great. If the pupil can be accommodated at your school, let's say they just have a speech-only IEP and it's not going to be a huge burden and there's space available, we accommodate that pupil. The county tells us that we cannot decline an IAP unless we are completely out of space. So it's really about space availability.
Next question is it's a two-parter, but very related. If a child is enrolled and they move out of district, they can stay the whole year. Really the question, though, is does that include ECSE?
EXE. If a child is enrolled and they move out of district, they can stay the whole year. Does that include EXE? That's a Lorelei question. Or Deanne. Okay. Oh, thank you. That's right. You can answer the question if you know the answer. Thank you, Deanne. There it is. There's the answer. Does an IAP need to be completed? We already did that one.
That concludes the
written ones?
written
That's
portion of
neat.
the
What a
interview.
neat feature, the Padlet. You had your, well, who are you? Oh, hi. It's nice to have a face with the, yes, we have.
I have a question, since you opened the door of transportation.
Yes.
It is, I know that students who are choice are going to be choice at my school. That includes students who are choice are going to be articulating automatically to my middle school from my feeder schools.
Right.
That includes the VEEP, the choice, magnet, all of those. However, one of the things that we're finding is they don't often know if they get transportation, whether they're VEEP or choice. Point is, last year, 2 weeks before school started, all these students were choiced in, and 15 to 20 got a letter saying, oh, well, you don't get transportation because you're choice, not VEEP. And of course, I lost 12, 13 kids from that because they couldn't get to my school.
Right.
So I'm wondering if that is being resolved for, not only for the kids from my feeders coming to my school who think they have transportation, but for the
81 PI eighth graders who are going to be going to
Right.
possibly the high school thinking they might get transportation.
So there's a
through
couple of
choice.
things playing into that. One of them was the elimination of VEEP at the elementary level a number of years ago. So you shouldn't have gotten any VEEP pupils articulating to your school as VEEP, because we don't offer it at the elementary level. What you likely had was program improvement pupils who were being bused from their neighborhood to the elementary schools in your neighborhood. And when program improvement, when No Child Left Behind sunsetted in December of 2015, or was revoked or repealed in December 2015, sunsetted in July of 2016, districts were told that they should continue to support those families for one more school year, and after that we did not have to. So a decision was made to provide actually a little more support to those families. We agreed to continue to transport them until they exited their level, because we didn't want to displace families. And so what you may have seen is fifth graders who PI was over, their PI status was over. We converted them to choice. We allowed the parents the opportunity to either go back to their neighborhood school or be converted to choice, fully informed that there would not be transportation offered. So there was a bit of a little bit of extra work that went on there, and perhaps some families didn't quite get fully informed, but we worked to remedy that, and I don't think you're going to see that this year. In the choice application process, when a parent selects the drop-down on the drop-down menu, it tells them if it's choice, magnet, or VEEP, and whether or not transportation may be available. So you shouldn't see so much of an issue with it.
But the ones who are already in the elementary as a choice possibly had transportation in elementary.
They would have received a letter probably last November or October that informed them that their transportation status would end at the end of this school year. Actually, it was before the choice window opened, so that they would have that whole window to determine, do I want to stay and articulate and provide my own transportation, or do I want to make a different choice?
Thank you, because
You're
that
welcome.
has critical impact on
Absolutely.
the choice numbers being accurate.
Right.
Thank you.
And my staff spends a lot of time contacting families to make sure that they do understand.
Okay, I think we officially have time for maybe one more question.
Aida.
You mentioned about the three schools having priority with choice applications.
Yes.
In my case, Barnard, who just opened up the free for all this year.
Right.
So will those parents have priority consideration as their kids matriculate into K or K in our magnet program?
If they applied for choice, yes. Yeah, there's a priority assigned to it. All right. Everything you ever wanted to know about enrollment, but were afraid to ask. So call me or email me or contact my staff if you have other questions. We're here to help. And if you're down here at the Ed Center and you want to stop by and say hi and see our lovely office, we invite you to do so. If you have flash drives with slideshows or anything exciting about your school, we love to display that in our office, and a lot of times it gets parents' attention. And so we help to try to promote enrollment at your schools as well, with all the Promethean technology that we have in our office. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you to my wonderful staff for putting up with me in the last week. Thank you. Have a great afternoon. Yay, wow, applause. Woohoo.